So welcome everybody to our Discover Edible Mushrooms workshop. Really glad you could join us and looking forward to a great session. We're going to be here for about an hour and a half. We're going to do an extended one because there's lots to talk about and we want to get to your questions as well. I'm James from Woodland Classroom up in Northeast Wales, over in Wrexham, but I'm not alone tonight. We've brought in the big guns this evening. We've got Dave Watson from Woodland Survival Crafts.
Good evening.
Great, and we've had a huge response from people all over the UK and beyond. I even think we've got a couple of people from the United States booked in tonight, so welcome wherever you've come from. And just to tell you a bit about Woodland Classroom, we've been running since 2014, and we use 2 National Trust estates up here in the Wrexham area, which we get to explore, and there's some fantastic ancient woodland. And we run outdoor courses in bushcraft, wild food, nature connection, mindfulness in nature, forest school for kids, all kinds really. But over lockdown, we of course had a lot of that shut down. So we've been running things online, and the wild food courses we've been running have really taken off. And every month we've been running these wild food workshops, and people kept asking about mushrooms. And we thought mushrooms need proper attention. We need to really take some time if we're going to teach the mushrooms across the internet like this. So that's why we've created this special session, and this is what people have asked for, so we're very happy to do it. And yeah, I mean, our aim with Woodland Classroom is just to get people from all backgrounds having a deeper connection with nature. That's our aim, and food is a great way to do that because we all have to eat, so we might as well eat some great wild food. How about yourself, Dave? Do you want to give people an introduction to yourself?
Yeah, Dave Watson. I've been teaching bushcraft survival and related subjects professionally for 25 years. And I spend most of my time now training and mentoring other professionals that want to up their game and put a bit of polish in the work and actually look deeper. I'm an approved trainer with the Institute for Outdoor Learning. And do wide range of courses. Yeah, it's almost like too many to mention, all sorts of different courses. My background is in wild food, stems from leaving school and really trying to get my head around life. And I actually spent a fair bit of time thinking about or focusing on trying to live off the land. And yeah, quite a lot of determination, but I have to admit a lot of naivety. But it's a fascinating subject. And I certainly realised that if I was going to begin to feed myself, I needed to really know my plants and progressively my fungi. I'm just noticing someone just said, I've done a course with you, Dave, earlier this year. It was fab. Oh, thank you very much, Tilly. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I still enjoy myself. I still enjoy doing this. So yeah, I think that's enough, isn't it?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and we'll send everybody some information on how they can find out more about what Dave does and his courses and our own. But let's get into this session. That's what we're all here for. A little rundown of the content. So we're going to cover probably 6 edible mushrooms in this workshop. We're going to be mentioning quite a few others. They're going to come up in conversation. You're going to see some other things as well, especially some closely related species. But what we want to do is have you go away confident that there are 6 commonly found edible fungi that you can identify and hopefully find in the next few weeks, because now is the time for a lot of these. And in fact, Dave's found a cracker just today, which he'll show you soon. We'll cover more if time allows. I'll be sharing my screen with a range of pictures of things we found and some recipes and things that we've done as well over the last few days. And we're going to tell you where you can get some further resources as well to learn more, including a video which accompanies this workshop. So we're going to do 2 question answers, one about halfway through, and then one at the end, and we'll see where that leads the conversation in the workshop as well. So Dave, let's set the scene. What have we been up to over the past few days? And
Well, I spent a rather good time over at Castle, James, and we had 2 days of wild food and wilderness cookery. with quite a lot of people, and it seemed to go down rather well. I certainly enjoyed it. Customers seemed to be very happy. I was we were properly well fed, weren't we? I mean, I think the icing on the cake was the elderberry and apple crumble that James headed up. That was, yeah, I think that won everybody over.
The toss of sloe gin that was in there probably had something to do with it.
Well, yeah, okay.
We found a lot of mushrooms, didn't we, out in the woods? The site we use is an ancient woodland site. And of course, now is the time, isn't it? There are mushrooms earlier in the year and a little bit later, but probably now is the richest time for the variety of stuff.
The autumn is obviously known for the many of the wild fungi. Quite a few of them will start, in the summer, and throughout the autumn they could be around. And very often they are sensitive to the temperature and the conditions. Very often wanting a little bit of warmth, but that bit of dampness, and they pop up for a few days and then they go off and disappear. It's one of those interesting ones, I think, from a wild food point of view, in that the mushrooms get a sort of imbalance of attention, because certainly from a living off the land perspective, it's very difficult to rely on those. The plants are generally more reliable. If you know where they grow, they will almost certainly be there the following year. They will flower at the same sort of time, and they're a bit more dependable. But the wild fungi, of course, there's a bit more excitement and adventure with them. And, if you get some really good ones, they really can be so full of flavour. They're well worth it.
Well, that's it. I mean, we've run courses, haven't we? I think last year we did it and we found one parasol, one lone parasol went into the pan with everything else. But this year we've had an abundance of all kinds of stuff. So there's a bit of rolling of the dice, although with the course of experience, you'll start to mark your spots, also mark the time of year that you found those mushrooms, and start to build up your kind of wild food diary and map of your local patch. And that's going to put you in good stead. So let's talk a little bit about the basics and the law when it comes to foraging. That's important for us to understand, to make sure that we're being responsible foragers and that we are doing things by the book. My first tip, and I think Dave would say the same, is take not only one identification guide out with you, but 2 or 3, especially with mushrooms, because as we found at the weekend, some books can have slightly different information in them as well, but also you can compare between the 2 as well. So that's good. Don't just rely on one book. Have a look through and take 2 or 3 out with you. So you might need a backpack. And the overriding kind of forager's prayer, which applies to mushrooms especially, is if in doubt, leave it out. So if you're not sure what it is, don't pick it, don't try it. And that's certainly an experience I had about a week ago with a mushroom that I thought might be a chanterelle, but turned out to be a poisonous one. It didn't match all the criteria, so I left it out, and I'm very glad I did. We want to be mindful when we're foraging as well, and only pick the plants when there's an abundance of them, and check that it's something that's not rare, protected, or of course illegal to pick, and particularly on places like SSI sites where they might be protected because of the special fungi that are there. So we're covering tonight abundant common species. None of these are listed as rare. They're ones that you could quite commonly find. So that's important too, because we know you've got a good chance of finding them as well. I use a rule of 5 when I go out foraging, and I say if there's 5 of something, I can take 1. So there's 1 for other wildlife to eat, because they might like to eat the wild food as well. 1 to go to seed or to spore in this occasion. 1 to get trampled, because inevitably mushrooms do get trampled and kids love to kick them over, don't they? 1 just to be in nature. And then the 5th one is for the pot. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but it puts you in the right mindset, and that's what I use. Be aware of where dogs might urinate, of course, right on the sides of paths, low down on the path side. So we can use our common sense there. We want to pick from further back in the path or with plants slightly higher up. And it's not just dogs we have to worry about, is it, Dave? There's foxes as well, which we're going to get to a bit later on, especially with one of the mushrooms. Be aware of foraging on the edge of agricultural fields where farmers might spray crops with pesticides, things like that. So particularly where you've got arable crops, that might be somewhere just to be a bit more cautious of, for sure. And, plants on sides of busy roads due to, some pollution. Although, pollution isn't half as bad as it used to be because a lot of lead's been taken out of fuels. Okay, best places to forage: hedgerows, woodland edges, quiet roadsides, fields and gardens. Anything you'd add to that, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fungi have specific places. I mean, most fungi will have specific places, but rich lawns, rich pasture, ancient woodlands, these are some of the best sites. Good stately homes have the rich pasture, but with the trees dotted all over the place can be some very rich areas indeed. And especially where we were at Chirk, some lovely ancient oaks. They're very rich areas indeed, and that is it's a common place to find various species.
So just foraging and the law. Okay, so we're all clear on that now as well. So basically, in the UK, if you venture onto private land without permission of the landowner, then it's classed as trespassing. Apparently, though, that's not so true in Scotland, where there's the right to roam. So you've got a bit more freedom there. And there is a common law right to collect wild food on land you have permitted access to. And that's the 4 Fs. So fruit, flowers, fungi, and foliage. But it's only for personal use, not for commercial purposes. So you can pick a load of sloes and use them, but you can't then make sloe jam and sell it. That's how that works. And of course, there is a caveat to that if any signage says otherwise on the site, that, actually, we're not allowing people to forage on this site, we have to respect that. And it must be wild as well. So, you can pick crab apples from the hedgerow, but you can't go into an orchard and pick a load of apples there. That's cultivated. That's not classed as wild. And it's illegal to uproot any plant without the permission of the landowner. And would we class picking mushrooms as uprooting, Dave?
No, because the main roots, the mycelium, they're all underground. There's a top general tip of a simple twisting of a fungus before you pull it up, and that will just reduce the amount of mycelium that are being pulled up, and it gives a little bit more chance of the rooting system to stay in good condition.
Well, 2 questions, Dave. Where to look and when to look?
When? Well, the last couple of 3 weeks and the next couple of weeks are like the prime time for a good portion of the fungus. There are plenty of species that will be around at different times of the year. There are some species of fungus that grow in the winter and are not likely to be around in the autumn. There are species that grow in the spring that are very unlikely to be around at other times. Now, the good news is that this is all part of identification. There's fungus. We're not going to look at them on this particular session, but there's quite a well-known one, the St. George's mushroom, that generally comes out in April and not uncommonly around St. George's Day. That is part of the identification of it. There's plenty of fungus that look a little bit like it, but they are very unlikely to be growing at that time of year. But now is a really good time to be out looking and just getting your eye in for things, not necessarily picking everything at all, but to have a good look and start to get more general confidence. Because if you come at this with no experience at all, that's a bit like trying to learn a language, in a very short space of time. But the more you can just get out and about, then one of the really helpful things is when you come across fungus again and again, you think, I'm sure that's the same as the what I saw last week or in previous years. And when you start seeing in the descriptions that they're exceptionally rare, you think, okay, it's probably not that one, or it's exceptionally common. And you think, okay, it starts to help build the picture to help identify, the species. On top of that, of course, there's very often an associated plant, very often a tree, where the particular fungus has a heavy bias. Sometimes it's uniquely on that tree. Usually it's just predominantly on a certain species. The more you get into this, the more you see exceptions to the rule. But for the early stages of learning, stick to, if it says it only grows on a particular type of tree, stay with it until you've gained so much more experience that you can cope with one or two exceptions, which they happen. Okay.
Yeah, good. Well, on that, in terms of things that we can find right now, let's start with the first one, which is a cracker that you picked up today.
About 4 hours ago, yes. And this one is probably one of the most well-known of fungi, for certainly the wild fungi. And it's this. Lycoperdon giganteum, otherwise known as the giant puffball. This is a moderate size one. It looks like a ball. The top warnings for this is that you could mistake it for two things. If you're in the fields, you could mistake it for a sheep. And if you're in urban areas, you could mistake it for a football. Okay, but apart from that, there's not really anything you could get that wrong with. They're great in terms of obviously their size. You've got something of substance here. I've just sliced that open, and you can see this sort of pure white. Looks a bit like marshmallow. Alas, it does not taste like marshmallow. But big size, there is nothing that you can mistake this for.
There we go. It gives you a bit of a scale of a probably slightly even larger one there.
Yes, exactly. That is a particularly fine specimen. I found one years ago that I weighed, and it was 2 pounds 2 ounces. Certainly quite a substantial fungus. I mean, the most common thing that I do with the giant puffball is to slice into a nice, thickness piece. Take off the any dirty outside, and fry that in the pan with a bit of oil or butter, and you get a nice golden brown colour on it. Now, as such, the giant puffball doesn't have a deep flavour, has a subtle flavour, but where it comes into its own is more the texture, and mixed in with other flavours, be it eggs or bacon or other fungi, then it can really bulk up very, very nicely.
Where are people going to find these ones, Dave? Then is this a woodland species?
Yes, good question. So they like verges, grassy verges, edges of fields, sometimes in the middle of fields. But I tend to find them. This one was just on a country road verge. I found several this year. I did find one which was in a strange place. It was in a woodland, which I generally don't see them in, but it was fairly close to the edge. And as I say, there wasn't really anything that you could get them wrong with. Now, the main thing to be aware of is that after a little while, they start to go a bit yellow. And as soon as they start going yellow, they're really quite bitter, and progressively they would turn your stomach. So, you know, you want to have them when they're pure white. And sometimes, you know, you might get just the tiniest little bit in the center, and then, yeah, okay, cut it out and use some of the others. You can, in fact, if you've got a good site where you can come back to, maybe it's on a piece of your land or someone that you know, it's quite possible to extend the life of a puffball by taking a slice off the side and keeping it in situ, and it will keep growing. You're not going to kill it by just taking a slice or two. So you can extend the life a couple of days. I'm freezing some.
And with the giant puffball, is it, when you find it in meadows and things, is it particularly a sign of, you know, wildflower meadows, or can it grow in like improved pasture and all kinds really? Is that not really a factor?
It generally likes undisturbed pasture, you know, rich pasture that's been well established.
Good, good. Brilliant. And yeah, so you fry it up like a steak, don't you? Lots of butter added to this kind of thing. And
oh, yes.
It's a good
actually, one of the nicest ones I did, and this is according to my customers, and I got a load of tortilla wraps and had some of this and some bacon, but I handed it out to a number of people and they just commented on how extremely nice that was.
Good. Sounds great. Sounds good. Brilliant. Okay, it's my turn. Okay. I'm going to talk to everybody about the parasol mushroom, Macrolepiota precaria. That's the first time I've said that one. So there we go. Let's get this one out. The parasol is a good one, and it's out now. In fact, it's been out for quite a while, actually. But let's get some shots here so you can see what I'm talking about. This is my haul from last year, actually, and you can see they get big as dinner plates. So we're starting with the huge mushrooms first here, and it's that size of the cap there which really does define it really as a mushroom. Really, it really is a bold statement, and when you find a good crop of them, you can get a lot from an area. Let's have a quick look here. This is why they're called parasol mushrooms, because unsurprisingly they look like parasols, little umbrellas, and in the middle there, I can only really describe that as a brown nipple. I guess that's the best way to remember it, but it's very distinctive there in the top. And you can see also that the cap is covered in kind of light brown scales there. Now, this is very much one that can appear in grassland, but also at woodland edges as well. I found it under old oak trees this last weekend as well. But generally, kind of grasslands is where you're going to see it sitting out on the landscape, and you can spot it from quite a way off once you get your eye in. And some of them are almost too pretty to pick, really. But again, maybe rule of 5, take one and leave the others for everybody else to enjoy. But they are really quite distinctive, and I wonder how many of you have maybe seen these out and about, because there's been a lot around our area recently. And in fact, that's this one here that I had with me, taken a couple of weeks ago. It's a little bit dry and sorry for itself, but we can see here how the cap starts closed and then opens out flat, as we saw in the last picture. But it's quite a tall, thin mushroom in the grand scheme of things, and then with the huge parasol hat on top. And we get a really good look at those brown scales there across the cap. Really quite distinctive. When they're young, you can eat them, they're perfectly good. It's got gills rather than sponge or tubes underneath the cap there. And the gills are a creamy white colour. When you cut it open, the flesh doesn't bruise or discolour. And that's interesting. And that's something, identifying feature that you'll see come up again and again with mushrooms. Does it go a certain colour when it's exposed to the air, the flesh, or does it bruise? And that can be a deciding factor as to whether it's one type of mushroom or another. And with the parasol, it doesn't. It stays the same as it is. And it's got a lovely smell to it. Some people say it smells of warm milk. I don't quite agree, but that's what people say. But you see that ring on the stem there, this little ring here, that's really distinctive. not because it's not the only mushroom that it's the only mushroom that has that, but because that ring can be separated slightly from the stem. It won't work on this one because it's been dry too long, but you can actually just fiddle with it and then push it, and it will come loose on the stem and it will go up and down the stem. And that's quite a good identifying feature to say that it is the common parasol and not the shaggy parasol, which we'll get to soon, and it's important to know the difference. But you're looking for those gills there. That's where we are. Let's have a look. These are some slightly sorrier species there, sorry, specimens, slightly past their best, but still some good eating to be had. And they're also a species that dries very well. And I've actually got a whole bunch here in this tub that I dried the other week. So a lot of the ones that I found. And you can dry them on top of a radiator with a bit of kitchen roll, or you could put them in the oven on a low setting with the door slightly open, or perhaps in the airing cupboard. But I've got a dehydrator now, which is great. But the first batch I did like that. And it works very well, and it means that you can extend the life of them, of course, in terms of being able to use them through the winter. And in fact, this other box I've got of parasols are a year old. They're from last year. They smell perfectly fine, a little bit darker, a little bit browner. These are the ones I did on the radiator, and they're perfectly fine. And we had some of these at the weekend. So drying the mushrooms out is a good way to get a lot more out of them in terms of the season. And there's a fantastic mushroomy aroma coming out of there for sure.
Yeah.
Let's go back
to what you pointed out, James, with that, is that they do dry very, very well. The other side of that is that if you pick them in the early morning when there's a dew, they very often hold a lot of moisture, and it will take an extra amount of drying. So pick them a bit later in the morning, when the breeze and the sunshine has dried a lot of them off. I've not used these dehydrators, and they may well override this, but I've certainly found that it takes quite a long time, and especially if there's a few little maggots in there, then it seems to be a battle of wills. Who can I dry them out quick enough to stop them being eaten away by the maggots? And the other main thing about this one, just to be aware of, is going back to a comment that James made about it's getting so high, then foxes do tend to enjoy picking on the tall ones and using them to mark their territory. Now, the good news is you can generally tell because there's usually a sort of greeny metallic taint on the sections that have been urinated on. So when they're in this sort of condition, they quite quickly. I mean, I've sometimes seen the very fresh urine in the yellow droplets, the straw-coloured droplets on them, but they actually start to taint the colour. And just to clarify, they're not ones I go for.
No. Is there a smell as well there, Dave?
Not particularly, because they absorb so much. They absorb the moisture so well. I don't think the urine is so obvious for an aroma, daft as that sounds.
Thanks, Dave. So just going back to the shrooms themselves there, have a look at the stems and what kind of is described as like a snakeskin-like pattern on the stem. That's quite key as well. And there's a good image there of kind of the younger parasols opening out at different stages before they're fully open. And certainly this one on the bottom is perfectly edible when it's young. It'll have nice firm flesh. And we had one just like that. But it gives you a good idea of what they look like at different stages of their life. They've got a long season as well, all the way kind of from early August to late September. Be interesting to see in the next few weeks whether they're still out and about. Yeah. Something I'm checking for, to check that season.
Yeah, these are nice ones that are cooked. I mean, with the dried fungus, they're brilliant to add to a stew because the flavours really come out. Fresher ones, I would generally stick in a frying pan and add them to a main dish of other things, onion, potato. If you're a meat eater, bacon, simple meats, or partridge legs, pigeon, whatever. I mean, we've had a fair few. This was lovely at the weekend.
The venison with parasol mushroom, which is the large pieces of mushroom you can see on the left there. There's also a penny bun in there, and there's nettle and spinach and a bit of dulse as well. So the flavours really spoke for themselves as well.
Sorry, James. This is James's cooking here, which I was very pleased with indeed.
Great, good. One other thing we need to know about with the parasols is that there is a closely related cousin called the Shaggy parasol. And its name is pretty helpful because it's shaggier by appearance. The scales are larger there, as you can see. The edge of the rim is a little shaggier as well. And they're shorter and squatter. They're not as kind of tall and thin as the common parasols. And this isn't a poisonous species. However, with some people, it's said about 25% of people, they get a bit of an upset stomach after eating the shaggy parasol. So the general advice with this one is have a little bit and see if it agrees with you. And if all's well, then the next night you can cook it up in a dish. But Dave, it's one that I think affects you, you said.
Yes, yeah, I won't have a lot of this. I will happily have some, but I won't be, I'd have a small one complete perhaps, especially if it's with lots of other things, but I won't have a lot of it.
And generally, the one way to make sure you're not picking shaggy parasol, if you're concerned about that at all, is to go for the really large parasols, because the shaggies don't get as big. As far as I understand, they only get up to around the 15 centimetre, whereas the parasols, the commons, as you've seen in that picture, get up to dinner plate size. So if you're only picking the big ones, then it's going to be the common parasol.
Yeah, one of the classic things to tell, I mean, even with this one, the button ones, a little bit squarer cap and these big broken up sections. Now, with the, I would generally steer clear of button mushrooms anyway, until you're really confident in what they are, because a lot of button mushrooms can grow into something that looks remarkably different. So you certainly want to get some experience before you start picking the really small ones before they come out. But the main thing with the shaggy parasol, and here's a variant, a little bit darker, you get it in the woodlands, is that when you break off the cap, we've unfortunately not got a really good picture of this at all, but it has a orangey tint to it. So you often see at the base of the stem, or where it's been bruised underneath in the gills, it'll often have an orangey tint.
And that goes back to what we said about the common parasol, where the flesh doesn't bruise. Or as Dave says with the shaggies, there is that tint coming in. So that's another way to tell the difference between the two. Okay. Best place to find those mushrooms, Brenda's asking? Grasslands.
Rich grassland, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the sorts of places that I've seen.
We find them under bracken in Woodland. We found it there as well. But you've got grassland right next door as well. So, those spores are coming in.
Where we found the first one at Chirk was classic location. So we got rich woodlands, but with, grassy pathways that had obviously been well established there. And, that was where I'd be looking for them.
Sophie asks, are the stems different? They look as if they are. They are in shape, really, more than anything else. The common parasols are taller and thinner, whereas the shaggy parasols, to extend a little bit, kind of squashed and shorter generally. Yeah, that's what I'd say about that. Right. I think it's time. It's Dave's turn. You can talk about the shaggy ink cap.
Yeah. So let's bring up a. This is a good one because it's another nice and pretty easy to identify fungus. You will often see this in gardens, in grassland generally, and it's got a couple of names. Its Latin name, I think, is still Caprinus comatus. Lawyer's wig is a common name, and you can see why. This general shagginess, woolliness to it. So it's a family of fungi. This is the most I'll say the most common one. It's the one that stands out nicely and pretty easy to identify. Now you'll see here on the right hand side, these are nice, these absolutely perfect specimens here. The one on the left is just starting to go darker on the lower section, and the rim is going a bit black. Now, the colorations on the inside are very pinky gills, then go into chocolate brown, then go into very dark brown indeed to black, and starting to break down. As soon as the colours go properly into the sort of rich chocolatey colours, they're a bit bitter. And this is what it ends up as. You can see now why it's called an ink cap. It turns to ink and it will just drip. So, you know, at this stage, they are way beyond edible. So you want to pick them when they're still pinky to brown. It's not one to try and dry. And I generally, if you start cooking with it, it will mush up quite quickly. This is one where if you're confident with it and you've weighed up that it's in good condition and you, to your best knowledge, has not had any urine in it at all, I will have this one raw. Now, obviously, that comes with its own risk, and you know, you've just got to take that level of responsibility yourself. There's no way any of us can say this one is safe. You've got to just use your old-fashioned word here called common sense. You've got to weigh it up and think, what's the likelihood of anything being on this? But it is a very delicate flavour. This is interesting because many of the fungi have got quite tough stalks. This one is a lovely, delicate one that, you know, if you had a series of like cream cheeses and like, you could use it as a dip stick there. It's really quite pleasant. One of the most interesting dishes I did with this was fried some up, discarded some of the moisture because it did exude quite a lot of moisture, which was a bit over the top, add a bit of garlic and had it on toast. And although the colours didn't look that attractive, the flavour was great. So it's very sort of grey mush that you're putting on, but it was very nice indeed.
And have you talked about the habitat for this one, Dave?
Yeah, so grassland, it's quite a variety of places, but it does like its grassland, and I see it in people's gardens, not uncommonly. It's probably worth just mentioning a close relation of this. This is the common ink cap. Now, this is a little bit more awkward because there are a number of fungi that look a little bit like it, but it's probably worth just mentioning. It's funny that this one's called common because I would say the lawyer's wig is more common than this one, but this one is a particularly interesting one. It's very pleasant flavour if you're confident with it, but it's not one for the beginner. Not least of all because if you've got any alcohol in your system, then you're going to feel very ill indeed.
So generally, would you say to people, steer clear of this and just stick with the Shaggy?
I would stay clear of this until you're really confident with it at all. And if you like a drink with your meal, then this isn't one to have anyway.
And actually, when they're past their best, as we can see here, it looks very similar to the Shaggy ink cap, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite difficult to tell the two apart, but this is the common ink cap here that's kind of gone over.
Yes.
Here it is again. You've got those vertical lines that you don't get with the Shaggy ink cap. They're quite different, but obviously you've got that blackness, which is the common feature.
Yes.
Yeah, good stuff. Brilliant. Okay, yeah, so one that kind of is one that's good for kind of mushroom gravies, that sort of thing. And we do see it out and about. I've seen it in the woods and seen it in grassland as well. So it gets about, doesn't it?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Great. So we're going to do our first question and answer session, and we'll go for it. See what there is. There's a couple.
I did notice one anyway, which made me smile because it's like, what's it like with bacon? I've yet to find a mushroom that isn't nice with bacon. So,
an interesting question. James Hunter asks: if I pick a mushroom and discard it on the ground, will it still reproduce? Will it still drop spores?
Yes, generally, yes. Most of the fungus. If you pick it and you decide that you're not going to use it for whatever reason, put it where the spores will fall into the ground, and it will carry on, throwing the spore out. And of course, one of the things, I mean, in a way, it's a little bit advanced, but, if you get into the fungi, then the spore print, if you put this on a piece of white paper, a cap of a mushroom face down, then overnight it will throw spore at it. And in the descriptions, it will usually tell you the colour that it should be. So it's another helpful idea in identification.
Brilliant. Someone else is asking, what do we do about cleaning mushrooms generally? And we had some pretty dirty ones at the weekend, didn't we? They had quite a few kind of the spruce needles on. We just used a dry brush. If you get a mushroom knife, that comes with a brush on it, but any old kind of soft brush will do it. But would you throw a lot of water at mushrooms, or is that going to be... I
generally avoid it. As a general rule of thumb, I prefer to use a brush, and that is partly going back to what I said with the parasol mushroom. They absorb moisture very easily, and then you start losing the flavours. Now, it's a general sweeping statement. So if I'd seen, there are certain types of fungi that grow through some very dirty ground and the edges of roads, and I would then brush them off. And if they're firm and young, they will coat with a little bit of a wipe with a damp cloth if you need to. Obviously, you've got to decide, well, what is it on there, and what do you want to get rid of? Go careful. Again, use a bit of common sense, but be aware if you're going to wash them, there's more likely that you're going to just start to affect the flavour.
Okay. Lynn asked an interesting question, and you've kind of touched on this a little bit. How much does time of day, kind of temperature of what's going on in the season, and the rainfall affect when you're going to be out for picking? Is it true after rainfall, now's the time to go pick? Is it early in the morning, end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is the level of moisture in the ground and the temperature. So although we've had a fair dry spell and not proportionately that much rain for a while, there is still moisture in the ground on most places that I've seen. But a little bit more moisture, I suspect we'll see another outpouring of other fungi species. It does like a little bit of warmth. It doesn't like, many species don't like the temperature too cold, and the early autumn very often prompts the growth of these wonderful, I'll say plants, they're not plants, fungi.
No, they're closer to animals actually in the whole tree.
Ah.
Yes. Somebody also asked, how big are the ink caps? We didn't get a kind of sense of scale there with the Shaggy ink caps. I've seen them.
That's very interesting, because what I notice on my travels in Croatia, what seems to be exactly the same species will be yeah, 20% bigger. But there now then, let me have a think. So a good-sized common ink cap could be the size of this pen. Not usually will it be taller than that. You know, what's that? Is that 12, 13 centimeters? You know, 5 inches, 4 or 5 inches, something like that.
Liliana says that she uses a basket because she heard that with the open weave, it lets the spores fall to the floor. It's interesting. I noticed that because I read the other day, John Wright, who writes quite a few books about mushrooms, says he sees no truth to that whatsoever, other than it's just nice to have a basket made of natural materials, of course.
Yeah, well, you don't want them to sweat. Fungi do sweat, so putting them in a sealed bag isn't really a good idea. If that's all you've got and you're going to do it fairly quickly and go back home, it's not a major issue. But it is nice to sort of, a basket is a nice thing to have.
Interesting question. You know, I don't know the answer to this one, but I suspect what the answer is. A couple of people asked about taking mushrooms home and trying to get the spores so they can plant them or grow them at home. The thing is, the mushroom is the fruit of a much larger organism. There's all the mycelium under the ground, and that's where it's really going on. And a lot of mushrooms are associated with ancient woodland soil, and a lot of the leaf litter that has built up over many, many years. So are we going to be able to recreate that in our gardens?
Not very easily. No, there are a few where it's a little bit more straightforward, and you can buy the little packs of spore and they'll tell you how to grow them, be it shiitake fungi, oyster fungus, and
you get plugs, can't you, that you can stick into dead wood as well.
Yeah, but it's a nice idea, and theoretically it sounds straightforward. If it really was that straightforward, a lot of people would be doing it and there'd be fungus everywhere. It's not at all easy. And
yeah, this is why there's not so many truffle farms, because
yes,
making
otherwise we'd be all millionaires.
Yeah, that's it. But it's the same with, you know, lichens and moss. If you ever, you know, they say even if you take a stone that's got a lichen or moss in, you just turn it round, you've massively changed the microhabitat of that species, and mushrooms can be as picky as lichen or moss because of the amount of sunlight they get, all the wind, all of that. So, you know, trying to transfer that to your garden can be quite an ask. But yeah, interesting. Right, folks, we're going to go back on. Before we start up again, I just want to tell you about some other stuff that we've got going on, and then we're going to crack on with some more tasty mushrooms. So if you're enjoying all this that we're doing at the minute, we do this every month. Not so much with mushrooms, but with all kinds of other wild foods, berries and nuts and all kinds. And we have another workshop on the 15th of October that me and my wife Lee are running, which is part of a program called Your Wild Food Year. And for that one, we're going to be having an hour-long workshop looking at the best of wild food in autumn. And we also have a special guest for that every month. Last month, we had Craig Evans from Coastal Foraging in Wales telling us all about the best of coastal foods. And this month, we've got Adele Nosdal, who is the author of the Hedgerow Handbook and Foraging for Kids as well. She's based down in the Brecon Beacons. And she's coming on to talk to everybody about what she's been foraging this time of year and giving some recipe ideas. So really looking forward to that. That's going to be really good. So we'll send you a link about how to get onto that, and that should be good stuff. And also we have something called a Patreon page, which is something we set up as Woodland Classroom in a response to lockdown because we weren't able to run any courses. And that's where people give an amount of money per month. And in return, like a subscription service, you get a load of stuff back. And we do exclusive videos, we do wild food recipes, we do all kinds of bits and pieces. And we've called it Our Tribe. This is me and Lee here. And you can get a video, actually, that accompanies this workshop called Adventures in Mushrooming, which is really probably my misadventures in mushrooming as I find edible species and other not so edible ones. So we've made a special video that accompanies this, which you'll only see if you join the tribe. We also do a live Q&A every month as well, where you can ask questions about wild food, bushcraft, nature connection, anything you like. We do discounts on upcoming courses if you're a member as well, so up to 20% off these ones. And there's also 6 wild food walk videos on there as well, all the way from April to September, and we upload those every month. So there's a whole back catalogue of videos as well. So all kinds of stuff. In fact, in the latest video, we talked about the sea buckthorn and how we process that and make some really pokey juice out of it. So how that works is there's all kinds of stuff. There's different levels that you can join at. The more you give per month, the more stuff you get access to. But we'll send you some information all about that. But if you like what you see here and you'd like to see more, then do check it out. The last thing though, won't cost you a bean. And that's something else that I've created over lockdown. If you're interested in trees, I've created a video tree ID course, which is totally free. Something I've done over lockdown. It's called Kickstart Your Tree ID Skills. And it goes through 3 different native trees through all 4 seasons of the year. And there are downloadable PDFs of cheat sheets for taking out in the woods. There's videos, there's questionnaires, there's picture galleries, and I'd love you to join it. It's free to join, and do check it out. I'll send you a link to it. And yeah, I'm really pleased with it. So do have a look. But enough of that from our sponsors. Let's get back into some mushrooms. And actually, it's me up next. I'm going to talk about the jelly ear fungus. Okay, so the jelly ear fungus, mostly associated with the elder tree, particularly dead elder branches and trunks. That's where you're going to see it. And in the woodland we were at the weekend, it was all over the place because there was a strong elder understory of the woodland there. For anyone not familiar with elder, this is what you're going to see in a minute. Elderberries, which of course are a whole wild food in themselves. Lots of good stuff to be had there. And you can make elixirs, juices, crumbles, all kinds of things out of this. Really good stuff. So look out for the berries. And the leaves of the elder tree are starting to turn from green to this now. So you're starting to see a lot of this, particularly in the next few weeks as well. So look out for the leaves here, which are several leaflets which make up one leaf of the elder tree. And it's a short, messy, scrubby tree with an old, wrinkly bark. That's a way that some people remember it's called elder, because they think of bark like an elderly person with all the wrinkles on the bark. One way to think about it. But it's this jelly ear fungus which is associated with it. And if that's not a great example of it looking like a rubbery ear, I don't know what is. And that's pretty perfect. This is what it looks like. And let's be fair, it doesn't look too appetizing. But it doesn't really taste it too much either. It's pretty bland, pretty kind of nondescript really. But the best way to use it, I find, is to add bulk to a meal. And even though it's quite bland and tasteless, it's an easy one to identify. So it's one you're not going to come a cropper with really, especially if you're looking at it just on the elder tree there. Here's another view of it as well. And also, if you dry it, like I've got some examples of here, this is the dried fungus here. It's all kind of gone crispy now and black. But it dries very easily. If you then crumble that up or cut it up and put it in a stew or a soup, when it rehydrates, it will soak up all the flavors. So instead of putting it in wet, when it's just going to be kind of watery and rubbery, if you put it in with the food you're cooking in dry, you're going to get all those flavors. You can see it dry here, actually. Look how different it is there. And actually in dry days, you're going to see it on the elder tree all crispy. And on wet days, it's going to be all rubbery on there as well. So yeah, it's a good one to know. It's easy to identify. Kids love it because it's got that ew factor to it, you know, thinking of like chewing on someone's ear. But if you get a dry one, what you can do is pick it off, pop it in a cup of water, and within about 15 minutes, it will rehydrate and swell to many times its size. Here it is in its typical environment. We can see some dead elder there, and the jelly ear fungus growing on it. Actually, in Japan, they apparently make a soup out of jelly ear fungus. And a friend of mine, when they were over there, said it was one of the few vegetarian dishes she could actually get a hold of. And she didn't rate it too much. But, as I say, it's worth talking about because it is so common and it's easy not to mistake for anything else. And it's a good one to start with.
Yeah, it's worth adding that it's predominantly on elder, but it will grow on broadleaf trees generally. I've seen it on most at some point. However, I would not go searching for it on any other tree than the elder. I'd expect to see it on the elder. If there's a lot of sycamore in the area, that I would classify as the second host for this particular fungus. And it's interesting because you can look at it in different ways. As James said, not particularly tasty, but it can grow at any time of the year. So if you're looking at it from a more living off the land or in a survival angle, you've now got in many European environments you could find this and chop it up, add it to something easy to identify like nettle tops, and before you know it, you're getting something down you that's starting to get you feeling like you've had something resembling a meal.
Yeah. Somebody's asked, can I say the story about the name? So yeah, it used to be known as Jew's ear fungus. As far as I understand, that's because it's associated, apparently Judas Iscariot was said to have hung himself on an elder tree. So that's where that name comes from. But people tend to call it jelly ear fungus now, but it's the same thing for sure. The way I use it, I've got it mixed up here with a load of other dried mushrooms. You can see bits of it. The darker stuff is jelly ear fungus. And that's where, for me, it comes into its own because it's in with a stew with a load of other stuff. Otherwise, if you use too much of it, you're going to be chewing on it. But when it rehydrates, the texture's fine, just as if it was wet anyway. A little bit rubbery, so cut it up small rather than having big bits to chew on. That's what I would say with that, and use it to bulk out those soups and stews. But as Dave said, it's around most of the year, so it's a good one to find, when pickings are slim in, February, when not a lot else is going on. So, next one, we're going to start to talk about the penny bun, which is probably the king of wild mushrooms. It's a boletus, and I'm going to pass you over to Dave for this one because it's a family where there's some interesting subtleties going on, and we need to understand those. So, over to you, Dave.
Okay. Yes. So the penny bun, otherwise known as the sep, and is an absolutely wonderful fungus, and one that many people search out for. It's certainly one that chefs will pay handsomely for if they're sliced and dried, because it is so rich in flavour. And you can see from this picture why it's called the penny bun. It looks like a really good wholemeal bun. And it's part of quite a large family of fungus, which predominantly are in the woodland or the woodland edges. This one, looks like a grass verge. In my main woodland, where I run my courses, they are on the edge of a grassy track, and it's a real gem. But there are quite a number of similar species that you just need to be a little bit aware of, but it is one that's got a few distinctive features. You see that's a nice sized one there.
Yeah, showing off the size of it there. That was a monster. It's a little bit past its best to pick, which is a shame.
Yeah.
But,
well, it is, but looking at that one, it may well be that sections of it are still good. It can often be reasonably free of maggots, which other boletus species tend to attract them. They're not. Oh, this is a lovely couple of specimens to look at. We haven't got gills. Okay, what we have got is like a sponge, and we call them pores. And this is it really helps separate from a lot of different types of fungus. There are a few which have got something similar, but these woodland fungus with a brown mealy cap are typical to the boletus species. Now, look at the one on the right. Now, this is a classic penny bun. Look at the bulging nature of that. Well, it's a stipe, the correct term. I'll use the word stem because we'll all understand that one, but it's a stipe. And you look at the coloration underneath the cap, it's a little bit of a buff colour there. It's not yellow. Very bulging stem or stipe, very mealy cap. This is classic Boletus edulis, and which is interesting that it gets called edulis because it's edible. There are plenty of other fungus that are edible and are really quite nice, but this one is notable. That particular one, you know, the stem is also worth cutting up and eating. Obviously, just checking for the amount of maggots and things you've got in them. I say this one, it suffers them less, but they will have them. The slugs love them to pieces. They often see sections taken out the cap.
Mm.
So it's probably worth looking at a couple of related species.
Okay, let's look at this guy first.
This is a very common one here. Generally similar. This one's got a yellow underside. There's quite a number of yellow sponged boletus. This one is the bay boletus, Boletus badius. Notice the stipe, the stem is a little bit straighter, not so bulging, which is typical. The cap is not that dissimilar to the penny bun. Now, this particular one, looking at that photograph, you see the coloration. Whenever it's bruised, you often get a bluish tint. Yeah, quite typical of the lemon yellow pores there. So it's often referred to as a good identifying feature of the bay boletus. I would disagree. Quite a number of them bruise blue. And be aware that very often with this species, more so than the sep, it suffers from moisture a lot, and I very often will peel away, get rid of the sponge because it just holds so much moisture that even on what appears to be quite dry days, you can squeeze it out and it will just, it's like a sponge. It really just holds a lot of moisture and then will completely ruin the flavour. However, sometimes you can tell they're nice and firm, in which case I wouldn't discard them. And we had a good example at the weekend.
Yeah, we had one. But compared to the penny bun, that doesn't discolour, does it? Whereas this one has that. Yeah. So although it can distinguish it maybe from some other boletes, it helps distinguish it from the penny bun.
Now, the good news here, and I have to be careful when I say this next little bit, in that, you know, this is a family where there's a good number of species. In fact, there's so many of them, they've been subdivided into other families. And but there is one or two very poisonous members of this family, but those have red or orangey tints to either mostly the pores here, and so with these sorts of colorations, it's unlikely that you're going to cause yourself any real problems. There are, however, some which are not at all edible because they are so bitter, and probably epitomizing this is what gets called the bitter boletus. Now this one's quite a bulging stem or stipe. Can you see almost like a net of dark threads all around it? It's got like a little net, of which there's a few species that have that, but this one with a bulging base, very buff coloured spore, pores there, they're not yellow at all, and they do start to crack on the top, which other species do that, but this is very bitter, but you're not going to cause yourself, as long as it's in good condition, you're not going to cause yourself any actual harm on that. You're just going to spit it out and go yuck.
Yeah, if you've cut it up and mix it in with your bay boletes or your seps, your penny buns, you're going to know if you've got this in your dish for sure.
Yeah. Someone's just asked, are there any lookalikes of the bay boletes? Yes, there's actually quite a few, but if they've got the prime colorations. This one, I think, is a red cracked one. Yeah. The reddishness on the stem, on the stipe, is fine. It's the red on the pores that we want to look out for. And this one will start to crack open on the cap, and you get the general pinky red colours. But this is fine. This is an edible species. And there are many others which are similar. But, you know, if we've got this lemon yellow sponge, mealy looking cap, it's in good condition, then you're not going to, you know, get poisoned by it. Mm. But it is worth, you know, things. You know, there are bracket fungus which have more pore-based looking, you know, underneath. Some of those are very bitter indeed.
Yeah, so if you're going to say like your kind of top 3 or 5 points to distinguish a penny bun from the other boletes, what would you give us?
So we got this big bulging stipe, and you slice it open, it'll be nice and white inside, very likely to be pretty maggot free. The lovely cap looking like a bun that you bought from the shops. In fact, this is a particularly good one because you've got like the different colours, as if, you know, one bit's been baked a little bit better than another section. It really, you know, is appropriately named.
Nice. But a really good mushroom, and of course one that dries very well. I've got a bunch of dried seps or penny buns here, and of course they can rehydrate back in some food, and they're very good fried back up in some oil, and they really hold a flavour. Very, very nice mushrooms. And of course on the continent you see them in markets all over the place, which are missing from our own, and it'd be lovely to see more of that, of course. We've got one more we're going to go through before we go to our final Q&A, and that's the chicken of the woods, Dave, which a lot of people will have heard of, I'm sure. But let's nail it down and understand its defining features, shall we?
Okay, right. Chicken of the woods, lovely one when you can find it. It'll grow on the deciduous woodland, on deciduous woods. And it's a bracket fungus, so it won't be coming from the ground, be coming from the side of a tree, and the colours are quite distinctive. Now this one's sort of like just over its best, but yeah, you might get away with some of the bits underneath, a bit lighter coloured there. But this yellow, pale yellow rim and slightly orangey main bit is quite distinctive. Typically I find it, you know, properly off the ground. I mean, there's a really good example. Now this one's lovely and young, and it gets called chicken of the woods because if you broke it open and peeled it back, it looks very much like breast chicken. Very much like breast chicken indeed, uncannily so. It doesn't taste of chicken, however, but it's got a nice texture and perfectly reasonable flavour. This one is a very young one. Very often, I say, good idea to let things grow to make sure that it really is what you think it is. But those colours, there's nothing that I can think of that is even at all like it. You get the brown bracket fungus, which grow a bit like it. There's oyster fungus, but the colours of the chicken of the woods are quite distinctive. Bracket fungus particularly, but along with others, it's always worth having a little bit to check that you're not going to react to it. Very often with fungus that grows straight from a tree, especially this one, it grows, I suppose, predominantly oak. It's a sweet chestnut it likes, but it will grow on others. And it can be bitter, especially when it's a bit older.
Okay, good stuff. And so you say it feels like chicken in terms of chicken white breast meat.
It's got that.
What would you do to cook with it? What would be your top tip there?
Well, that's a brilliant one for the stew pot, because it really looks like you've got some extra meat. Yeah, I think that's enough said.
Great, good stuff. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, folks, so those are all the species we are going through on this session. So all the species that are quite distinctive, really, and can't really get confused for too much else in the grand scheme of things. And they are pretty common as well, so you've got a good chance of finding them. And now is the season. So it'll be over to you to find these things. And of course, if you're not sure, do leave it out. And as Dave said as well, if it's young, you might want to leave it a little bit longer and get your eye in. Don't go to pick straight away. Take your time and look at what you've got. And it's best to make a positive decision, positive identification, than to make a mistake. Let's do some questions then. It's going to be over to you. And Karis has just come up with a really nice one. Dave, what's your favourite mushroom recipe?
I thought you were going to say what's my favourite mushroom. Now, that would have been a bit easier to have answered.
You can start with that.
And I will say something on that first, and not to sound like I'm a politician and deviating. I will come back to favourite recipe, but I was asked by Peter Jordan. He'd written some books on fungi, and he said, "Dave, what's your favourite mushroom?" And I said, "Oh, well, I think it's the Prince, Agaricus augustus." And his instant reaction was like, "Yeah, okay, let's putting that one aside. That was like so obvious." And it's like, "Well, just to you and I maybe, but not to everybody else." So it was just amusing the way he said, "Oh, obviously the Prince." So yeah, that and the Sep are absolutely great. I mean, I'm a great fan of Parasol fungus, and partly because I can gather it and dry it so easily, and then have it in things later. In terms of favourite recipes, this is where probably shouldn't admit this, but actually I'm not that much of a chef. My roots. My son is a great chef, so he's got it from somewhere. So I mean, I like to draw out the flavours of fungus if I've gathered it wild. So I don't want to mix it in with too many other things. So a simple stir fry is brilliant because it draws out the flavour very nicely of the fungus. So, some sliced potatoes and a bit of onion is a really good base to mix in wild fungus, because you're going to get the flavour of the fungus nicely. So that is my top one. But then the dried fungus, be it Parasol, be it penny bun, chopped up, broken up, added into a stew, can really add some rich flavour.
Cool. So Pete Gillett asked, can chicken of the woods be brown? Or is it always that colour?
The brown tends to be a related species, hen of the woods. And the problem with that is that you're starting to get into other fungus that can look a little bit like. So we've deliberately avoided that level.
We're opening up the world of bracket fungi then, aren't we? So we're to the chicken of the woods, which is really quite distinctive with that lemon yellow edge. If it's too far gone, it's not going to be good condition, then you're not going to want to be picking it anyway. That's for sure. Yeah. A lot of people asking about recommended books. So I'm going to show you 3 of the books that I use a lot of. I know Dave uses one of these as well. He's got a slightly older edition of this, but Roger Phillips, Mushrooms book. There you go. 2 versions of the same book. Get it secondhand on eBay or buy it new. Although we did find a little bit of contradicting. There's some updated photos in this version, the newer one. Bit hefty for going out in the field with, but it's very good. Very photo heavy. Lots of samples. Well, let me put it there. And good photographs where you can see the whole mushroom.
Roger Phillips is very good, got a very good reputation on this. And looking at that particular book that James has got, I would certainly try and get on the more recent ones because a couple of updates that I noticed on a brief look at that one, and so there'll probably be some more if I had time to look at it.
Another one, I think somebody mentioned this in the chat already, is the River Cottage Handbook by John Wright, who's a well-known forager. He's written quite a few books about hedgerows as well, and countryside law. A few years old, about 10 years old, but a great book, some good pictures, and it handles, the common edible species, whereas Roger Phillips' book is all fungi. This is particularly ones for the pot and recipes as well. So this comes highly recommended, a little bit lighter to carry around as well. As we said, always have a couple of guides. And if you want a real beast, as well, there's the Collins Fungi Guide, which is a big, thick tome. But like the Roger Phillips, you've got another good, reliable source here, which you can compare between the two with as well. So the Collins Fungi Guide, Roger Phillips mushrooms, maybe John Wright's mushrooms book as well. And also, if you just want to get into fungi and just start getting your eye and understanding the different shapes and what you might find, then this FSC fold-out guide is really nice. It's light, and it just gets you starting to think about asking questions about the shapes of the mushrooms, what might be out there, and getting used to the different names. So yeah, it's a good guide. I recommend that. That'll be on the Field Studies Council website there.
I've come across a few questions that have picked up my eye. Two good ones. One person has commented, found the chicken of the woods on a yew tree, and whether that would be one to avoid. Actually, I would say yes. It's probably a good idea because the levels of toxins in a yew tree, although probably open to debate, the fact is the mushroom will be imparting some of that into you. So I don't expect that you're going to fall down in a heap, but it probably wouldn't be a good idea. Another person's asked about the nutritional value, particularly with a survival situation in mind. Well, in long term in survival, you're going to need serious proteins. So there's a limited value. However, they have got more protein and certain minerals and the like, which is superior to many plants. The biggest thing in survival, I think, is the psychological aspect of it. And I can speak out of great experience on that one because I was out for several days on a very intensive survival course in the early 80s, run by some of the colleagues of Lofty Wiseman, famous for his being the SAS survival instructor and the author of the SAS survival handbook. And his colleagues were putting us through most intense thing I have ever done and ever wished to do. Thankfully, I'd got a good knowledge of wild foods, and there was some fantastic fungus out there. There was some great horse mushrooms, and thankfully no one else dared touch them because they weren't sure about them. I was absolutely satisfied of what they were. And with the few other bits that we'd found, I actually felt that I'd eaten something quite significant. But I know nutritionally that's a bit more questionable, but I knew I felt I'd eaten reasonably well considering the circumstances, and that helped me enormously.
And on the subject of protein in fungus, people keep asking about maggots, and it's just freaking them out a little bit that there can be maggots in there. Yeah, it is a bit of an issue when you're drying your fungus. I mean, if you're really concerned, I would say, you're looking for stuff in the best condition. So you're looking for stuff that looks fresh, looks good, it hasn't started to turn or go over. Cut it open there and then if you're not sure, and have a little look inside. That saves you taking it back home, doesn't it, for a start? But generally, dried out, you can beat them if it's not too infested. But yeah, what would you say about maggots, Dave?
Well, a few little maggots for me, great. absolutely no problem at all. But obviously there comes a point when the fungus is breaking down and it looks unattractive. And so it's proportionate, isn't it? If you are in a modern setting, we're trying to impress somebody on the table. We don't want maggot-eaten, fungus. That's sort of like not that romantic a meal that you're going to be having. However, put it into context. If you are in a real survival situation, then if the fungus is actually still in a level of condition and it is just you've now got maggots, well, actually, you're better off. Obviously, I say there's a point when it breaks down and then it's decomposing. Now that can start turning your stomach. If that starts turning your stomach and you're in a genuine survival situation, morale is under big threat here, and things can be the first domino that causes fear, anxiety, and real problems. So you just need to weigh that one up.
Yeah, I mean, pick them at their best, cut them there, and then have a little look. Certainly this one, I don't know if you can see it here, this is a penny bun. There's a few little holes, a few little bits of pinpricks of light where the maggots have been through, but for the most part, there was a lot of flesh here and it's in good condition. This has obviously been dried since, which is why it's shriveled. Use your common sense there, I would say, and go for the younger ones, which are in good nick. Yeah, Jerry just says, how do you cut the chicken of the woods from the tree, bearing in mind conservation?
Yeah,
again,
I mean,
slice it, don't disturb the tree behind, and maybe take some of the brackets, not all of them.
Well, I'll tell you what I've done, which makes sense to me, is I look at the bit that I want, and I can, because it peels like chicken quite well, I've often just taken a section out and thought, well, I probably will use this tonight. I probably won't use the rest of it, so I'm leaving it. So I've just taken a little section, and those brackets are very often, sectioned off. So I thought, no, that one's in good condition. Carefully cut that bit out and left the remainder.
Brilliant. Right, great. Right, we're going to wrap it up then. So where can people find out about what you do, Dave, if they want to come on one of your courses?
Woodland Survival Crafts.com. I am in the throes of the website being redone. So there's a few little bits of information that aren't quite up to date. And next year's dates will be out pretty soon. There's a wide range of courses. For introductory days, I do lime bark container courses, there's bow making, along with the more regular courses of mine, which are the bushcraft competency training, and of course, as James has done, as the mentoring scheme that I do.
Yeah, and I can attest to the quality of Dave's teaching. He's been my mentor into becoming a professional bushcraft instructor, so very highly recommended. And as for me, we're woodlandclassroom.com, and we are running all kinds of courses in bushcraft, wild food, and nature connection, mindfulness in the woods. But there will be a lot more courses going up announced over winter for the new year. But with lockdown, we're a little bit behind in announcing everything because it's so uncertain at the minute. But there'll be a lot of bushcraft, wild food, all kinds of stuff happening. So do stay in touch and see what's going on. And I hope to see some of you on one of these again, perhaps in October on the 15th.
Yeah, and hopefully with next year in the autumn, we'll be again working together, James.
Yeah, we'll be running our whole weekend next autumn at the back end of September, hopefully, in the ancient woods at Chirk Castle. So thanks everybody for coming, and do stay safe. All these changing restrictions happening at the minute. Enjoy foraging. Go for those safer species there, and enjoy it while the mushrooms are out, and cook up some great food. And I hope to see you all again soon. Thanks so much for coming and supporting our businesses as well during this time. We appreciate that. And have a great weekend when it comes. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.